I wasn't planning to stay longer than one night. That was the deal I made with myself somewhere around the Georgia state line. Attend the ceremony, sit in the back row, and drive home before anyone could turn my presence into a conversation. Then I walked through the front door and heard Jolene's voice from the kitchen, sugar-coated and sharp as broken glass. "She's between jobs again, I think. You know how she is." She wasn't talking to me. She was talking about me, and she was talking to my father. The town of Ridgemont sits at the bottom of a valley where two county roads cross, and nothing much happens unless somebody organizes it. My father had lived there 41 years, coached football at the high school for 27 of them, taught history to 3 generations of kids who still called him coach even at the grocery store. Tonight, the town council was giving him a civic leadership award. Plaque, handshake, maybe a short speech from the mayor. Jolene had been planning it for weeks like it was a state dinner. I parked behind the house and sat in the car for a minute, watching the kitchen window. Jolene moved past it carrying something, a casserole dish, maybe, or one of her signature desserts that she always made sure people knew were from scratch. My father's silhouette stayed fixed in one place, probably leaning against the counter the way he always did, arms folded, half listening. The screen door creaked when I opened it. Same sound, same rust. Jolene appeared instantly, wiping her hands on a dish towel with a smile already loaded. "Amelia," she said, stretching my name into 3 slow syllables. "Well, look who made the drive." "Hey, Jolene." Her eyes moved from my face to my clothes. Jeans, a plain gray sweater, flats. Practical. Invisible. Exactly what I intended. "That's what you're wearing tonight?" she asked. "I just got here. The Hendersons will be there, Pastor Lowell, the superintendent." She shook her head like I'd already failed. "Your father deserves people looking their best." My father came around the corner. He looked older than the last time, which was only 8 months ago. More gray, thinner through the shoulders. "Amelia!" He said it like a fact he was verifying. "You made it." "I did." He nodded. His eyes moved to Jolene, then back to me, calculating the tension the way he always did, measuring it, deciding it wasn't worth addressing. My father wasn't a coward. He was a man who had spent decades managing a household by avoiding the parts that hurt. Jolene leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I was just telling your dad that we might need extra hands tonight. Setting up the tables, pouring drinks. You don't mind, do you?" I set my bag on the stairs. "Sure." She smiled, satisfied. "Also," she added, voice dropping into that confidential register she used when she wanted something to sting, "people are going to ask what you're doing these days. You might want to have an answer ready." "I have an answer." "Do you?" Her eyebrows lifted. "Because last I heard, you left Fort Bragg, and no one seems to know what happened after that." I didn't correct her. I didn't explain. In this house, corrections became arguments, and arguments became stories Jolene told other people later with herself as the reasonable one. "I'm working," I said. "Working where?" "Jolene." My father's voice came from the kitchen. Not a warning, more like a request. "Please don't start." She raised both hands in mock surrender. "I'm just asking. People will want to know." She turned back toward the stove. "It just looks better if she has something to say, Donald. That's all." Something to say, as if my life were a prepared statement she needed to approve before I delivered it to the public. Upstairs, the guest room smelled like lavender air freshener. Jolene's signature. Everything in this house carried her scent now, her arrangement, her narrative. The wallpaper was different. The curtains were new. My mother's things were long gone, absorbed into donation bags and yard sales I wasn't told about until after. I sat on the bed and stared at the ceiling. She left Fort Bragg. That was the phrase. Jolene had been using it for 2 years, and by now it had hardened into fact. In Ridgemont, once Jolene said something 3 times, it became permanent. The truth was simpler and more complicated than anything Jolene could construct with gossip and inference. I hadn't left Fort Bragg. I'd been reassigned, but the details belonged to a world Jolene had no access to, and explaining classified personnel moves to a woman who measured success by local visibility was a conversation I'd stopped trying to have. My father knocked on the doorframe, soft, hesitant. You need anything? I'm fine, Dad. He lingered. I could feel the question forming, the one he never asked, the one about what I actually did, where I actually was, what my life actually looked like beyond Jolene's interpretation. But the question never came, it never did. Ceremony's at 6, he said, I know. He left. I reached into my bag and touched the edge of a leather credential case, smooth, stiff, official. I hadn't planned to bring it. Then again, I hadn't planned to need it. But plans are fragile things in houses like this. The Ridgemont Community Center was the kind of building that tried hard. American flags flanking the entrance, a banner reading Honoring Our Own, folding chairs arranged in precise rows. The parking lot filled early. Pickup trucks, old Buicks, a few newer SUVs with school district bumper stickers. Jolene emerged from the car like she was arriving at a gala. Hair styled, dress pressed, smile engaged before her heels hit the pavement. Remember, she murmured to me, adjusting an earring. Tonight is about your father. I know, so no scenes. I looked at her. When have I ever made a scene? She didn't answer that. She didn't need to. The implication was the answer. That my existence was inherently disruptive, that my presence required supervision. Inside, the air was warm and smelled like coffee and floor wax. A table near the entrance held programs and name tags. A woman I vaguely recognized handed me one. Amelia, oh my goodness, it's been years, Miss Ruthie. Good to see you. She studied me with that particular small-town intensity, warm but invasive. Your daddy must be thrilled you're home. Yes, ma'am. And what are you up to these days? There it was. The question Jolene had primed into the atmosphere. I'm working up in D.O., her head tilted. Still with the army. Still working. I moved before she could press further. Across the room, my father stood at the center of a cluster, shaking hands, accepting praise. He looked younger when people admired him, lighter. It occurred to me that admiration might be the only thing that made him feel real anymore. Jolene orbited him precisely, close enough to be seen, far enough to let him shine. She laughed at the right moments, touched his arm at the right intervals. She was performing, and the audience didn't know it was a performance. I found my place near the back wall, not hiding, positioning. Let the celebrated be celebrated. I'd learned that principle years ago, and it had served me in rooms far more important than this one. The whispers found me anyway. That's Donald's girl, right? Heard, she washed out. Such a shame. He must have taken it hard. I kept my face neutral. Neutral was a skill I'd paid for. Years of briefing rooms and tactical assessments and performance reviews where showing emotion meant losing ground. Neutral wasn't empty. It was loaded. It just didn't leak. The ceremony began with small-town precision. A high school student led the Pledge of Allegiance, voice cracking on indivisible. The mayor gave opening remarks, heavy on gratitude, light on specifics. A slideshow played, my father's career in photographs. Coaching, teaching, community events. I appeared in 2 of them, both from before Jolene. Jolene watched the slideshow with proprietary attention, scanning for imperfections. Then she found me. Amelia, she said, gliding over with a silver tray of drinks. We're short-staffed. Would you mind? The tray hovered between us, plastic cups of sweet tea and lemonade, a simple request, a deliberate demotion. She leaned closer. If you're not going to sit with the family, she whispered, you might as well help out. The old version of me would have set the tray down and walked out. The current version understood something different, that refusing would create exactly the scene Jolene wanted, would give her exactly the story she'd tell tomorrow. She insisted on being difficult. You know how she is. I took the tray. Of course, I said. Her relief was instant and satisfied. I knew you'd understand. I moved through the rows, offering drinks. Most people took one without really looking at me. A few did. Amelia, right? You helping out? A retired teacher squeezed my arm. Your father must be so glad you could make it. Glad. As if my presence were a bonus feature, rather than a birthright. Near the front, my father accepted a glass from someone else, laughing at a joke I couldn't hear. He hadn't looked for me once. I returned to the back, tray half empty, and waited. The MC, a city councilman with a booming voice and a flag pin on his lapel, was midway through introducing the next speaker when the back doors opened. Late arrival, heads turned, not because the door was loud, but because the person walking through it changed the air. He was tall, silver-haired, wearing a dress uniform with enough ribbons to write a history book. His posture alone silenced the nearest row. Two aides flanked him, both in uniform, both several steps behind. The MC faltered, then recovered. Well, it looks like we have a very special guest this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lieutenant General Raymond. He stopped, checked his card. Lieutenant General Alan Prescott, United States Army. The name rippled through the room. Even people who didn't know the rank understood the weight. 3 stars. The kind of authority that small towns encounter only in movies and funerals. My father straightened. Jolene's eyes went wide, then calculating. She adjusted her smile, already preparing to attach herself to the moment. General Prescott walked down the center aisle. Handshakes, nods, brief words to veterans in the front rows. Jolene positioned herself at my father's side, ready to receive. But halfway down the aisle, Prescott's pace changed, slowed. His gaze shifted, not toward the stage, not toward my father, toward the back wall, toward me. I set tray down on the nearest table. Muscle memory took over, spine straight, shoulders back, chin level. Years of discipline condensing into posture. General Prescott stopped 2 paces away, and then he saluted. The gesture was sharp, unmistakable. A full formal salute directed at the woman holding a tray of lemonade in a community center in Ridgemont, Georgia. I returned it, not theatrically, not with pride on display, simply correctly. He lowered his hand and extended it. Colonel Garrison, he said, voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. I didn't expect to see you here, Colonel. The word detonated in the room. Not Claire, not Amelia, not Donald's daughter, Colonel Garrison. His hand closed around mine, firm, professional, warm with recognition. Behind us, someone's program hit the floor. The sound was enormous in the quiet. A man in the second row. I hadn't noticed him until now, but his bearing marked him as active duty. Rose to his feet. Others followed. Not everyone, but enough. Veterans, reservists, a few active duty, personnel home on leave. Chairs scraped, hands lifted. More than 100 people watched a room divide itself between those standing at attention and those frozen in confusion. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jolene. Her face had gone white, not red with embarrassment, white, the color of systems failing. She looked at me, then at Prescott, then at my father, searching for the glitch, the error, the explanation that would restore the story she had built. My father stared at me as if I'd stepped out of a photograph he didn't remember taking. Prescott released my hand but didn't step away. You look well, he said, conversational, easy, as though we weren't standing inside a social earthquake. How's the transition to the Pentagon treating you? Smoothly, sir. Good. Your work at Campbell was exceptional. I've said so publicly. The words were professional, but in this room, they were devastating, because he wasn't revealing a surprise rank. He was acknowledging something that Washington knew, that the Army knew, that my chain of command knew, and that my own family did not. The MC stood frozen near the microphone, script abandoned. Jolene's mouth opened, closed, opened again. General Prescott turned toward the stage with practiced calm. I apologize for the interruption, he said to the room. Please continue. I'm here to honor Coach Garrison's service to this community. He called my father Coach, not Donald, not Mr. Garrison, Coach, the title that mattered most in this town. The gesture was gracious, deliberate, a general redirecting attention back to the man being celebrated. But the damage, or the correction, was already complete. People sat slowly. Whispers began, carrying a different frequency now. Colonel, her, Colonel, he said the Pentagon. Jolene found her composure the way a cracked windshield finds its shape. Still intact, but fractured in every direction. She approached Prescott with her hostess smile, hand extended. General Prescott, what an honor. I'm Jolene, Donald's wife. Prescott shook her hand courteously. Ma'am, you know Amelia, she said, gesturing toward me with brittle brightness. Donald's daughter. We're just so glad she could be here tonight. A subtle shift in Prescott's posture, recognition layered with something harder. Yes, he said evenly. I know Colonel Garrison quite well. Not Amelia. Colonel Garrison. Again. Jolene's smile flickered. Well, she laughed, the sound thin as paper. We're so proud she's found her way. After everything. Everything. The word floated between us like bait. Prescott's eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. Colonel Garrison's service record, he said calmly, speaks for itself. The correction was surgical. No accusation, no hostility. Just fast delivered with the weight of 3 stars behind it. My father's head turned, toward Jolene, toward Prescott, toward me. A triangle of incompatible truths collapsing into one point. The ceremony continued, but forward was fiction now. The MC stumbled through introductions. Applause came uneven, distracted. The room's gravity had shifted permanently. Every glance toward my father carried a new question. How did he not know? Every glance toward Jolene carried another. What exactly had she been saying? When my father's turn came to speak, he gripped the podium like it was the only solid thing in the room. I've spent my career, he began, voice rough, teaching young people to show up, to do the work, to earn what they get. He paused, his eyes found mine across the hall. I realized tonight, he continued slowly, that I haven't always practiced what I preached. Jolene stiffened beside the stage. My daughter is here, he said, and I'm proud of her. The words cracked something open in the room, not because they were dramatic, because they were late. Decades late. Applause followed, but it was different. Respectful, curious, tinged with the awareness that something larger than a civic award had just been acknowledged. After the ceremony, people moved through the hall in clusters, conversations now orbiting a different center. I received handshakes I hadn't sought. Ma'am, we had no idea. Thank you for your service. Jolene stayed near my father, but the dynamic had inverted. Before tonight, she had been the axis. Now she was the appendage, and the room could feel it. People greeted her with courtesy, not warmth, polite distance where social admiration had been. I didn't linger for congratulations. My father found me in the parking lot. No crowd, no Jolene, just him. Amelia, Dad. Up close, the shock was still written across him. Pride and disorientation fighting for the same space. I don't understand, he said. Not angry, just lost. You told me you left Fort Bragg. I told you I was reassigned. His brow furrowed, memory replaying itself against new evidence. You said you were moving on. I said I was transferred. He stared at me. Colonel? Yes. How long? A while. How long, Amelia? Long enough. Pain moved through his face, the particular kind that comes from realizing you missed something essential, not because it was hidden, but because you chose to believe the easier version. I asked you, he said quietly. I asked what you were doing in D.C., and I told you I was working. You let us believe. I didn't correct Jolene. The sentence landed like a blade laid flat. My father turned slowly, as if hearing his wife's name changed the direction of gravity. Jolene appeared at the edge of the parking lot, drawn by instinct, by fear of unsupervised conversation between people she needed to control separately. There must be some misunderstanding, she said, voice too bright, hands clasped in front of her. Donald, I'm sure. There's no misunderstanding, my father said. Jolene's eyes narrowed. I said what everyone was thinking. No. My father's voice was low, strained, unfamiliar to both of us. You said what you wanted everyone to think. Silence. You told me, she washed out, he continued. You told the Hendersons. You told Pastor Lowell. Because that's what it looked like. That's what you said it looked like. Jolene folded her arms. Defensive architecture. Always secretive, always gone. What was I supposed to do? Ask, I said quietly. Both of them looked at me. You could have asked, I repeated. Instead, you answered for me. Jolene's face hardened. I was protecting your father. From what? From embarrassment. The word landed wrong, and she knew it immediately. But it was out, irretrievable, hanging in the parking lot air under the Georgia stars. My father recoiled slightly. Embarrassment, he repeated. She disappeared. Jolene fired back, desperation sharpening her voice. She never called, never explained. I called every month, I said evenly. You answered the phone twice. Both times you told me Dad was busy. My father's head snapped toward Jolene. That's not, she started. March, 2 years ago, and again in June. You told me he was at a coaching clinic both times. I checked later. There was no clinic in June. The silence that followed was the loudest sound of the evening. My father's jaw worked. He wasn't a man built for confrontation. He was built for endurance, for patience, for the slow accumulation of respect through decades of steady presence. But endurance has a breaking point, and I watched him reach it. Go home, Jolene, he said. She blinked. Excuse me. Go home. I'll drive myself, Donald. Go. One word, but it closed a door that had been open for years. Jolene looked at me. Raw hatred flickered behind the carefully maintained exterior. Quick, unguarded, real. This is what you wanted, she whispered. I held her gaze. I wanted my father to know who I am. You wanted revenge. I wanted the truth. What it does to you isn't my responsibility. She turned and walked to the car. The door slammed. The engine started. The taillights disappeared down the county road, and the parking lot was quiet. My father exhaled, long, shaking, like a man surfacing after being held under. I should have seen it, he said. You saw what you were given. I should have looked harder. Yes, he flinched, not because I was cruel, but because I didn't soften it. He'd spent decades surrounded by softening, Jolene's careful management, the town's gentle admiration, the comfortable story of a good man with a wayward daughter. Tonight the softening was gone. I was proud of you, he said quietly. When you enlisted, when you finished OCS, I bragged about you for years. I know. Then Jolene said you'd left, and his voice broke. I believed her because believing her was easier than asking you hard questions and sitting with answers I might not understand. That was the most honest thing my father had ever said to me. We stood there under the parking lot lights, two people separated by years of silence and one woman's weaponized narration. Come inside, he said. Please. I don't think Jolene wants. I don't care what Jolene wants. The words came fast, sharp, unfiltered. Men like my father don't change loudly. They change in sentences like that, sudden, small, irreversible. We drove back to the house in his truck. The radio was off. The windows were down. Georgia in late spring smells like honeysuckle and cut grass, and for a moment I was 12 again. Riding home from a Friday night game, my father's hand resting on the steering wheel, silence between us that used to feel safe. Inside, the house was dark. Jolene's car was in the driveway, but she'd already gone upstairs. The bedroom door was closed, a line drawn. My father poured 2 glasses of bourbon and carried them to the back porch. We sat in the old rocking chairs, the ones my mother had picked out, the ones Jolene had tried to replace twice, but my father had quietly refused. Colonel, he said, testing the word against the daughter sitting next to him. Colonel. He shook his head slowly. I coached teenagers how to be brave for 30 years, and I couldn't ask my own daughter a direct question. You can now. Can I? Try. He looked at his glass, then at me. Are you happy? The question surprised me. Not the ambition question, not the rank question, not the logistics of military career progression. Are you happy? Most days, I said. He nodded. That's more than most people. We sat there a long time. Crickets and bourbon and the slow recalibration of a relationship that had nearly collapsed under the weight of someone else's fiction. I owe you an apology, he said eventually. You owe yourself honesty. I owe you both. He set his glass down. I let someone else define my daughter to me. That's not something a father does. You're doing something now. Is it enough? It's a start. When I stood to leave, he looked startled. You're going? I have work Monday. You just got here. I came for the ceremony. Pain crossed his face, then something quieter. Acceptance, tinged with the understanding that rebuilding doesn't happen in one night. Will you come back? Yes. He stood and pulled me into a hug. My father had never been good at hugs. His arms didn't quite know the geometry. But this one held something it hadn't before. Sincerity without performance, warmth without an audience. I'm proud of you, he whispered. I should have said it every day for the last 10 years. I believed him. That was the real ending. Not Jolene's humiliation, not the salute, not the rank. A sentence spoken on a dark porch with no one watching, no applause, no audience. Just a father who had finally stopped believing the comfortable lie and chosen the uncomfortable daughter. I drove away just past midnight. The road stretched out ahead of me, dark and open. In the rearview mirror, the porch light stayed on, small and steady against the Georgia night. Not a victory, not a triumph. Something quieter. Truth had arrived the way it always does, not with a shout, but with a correction so calm it left no room for argument. And if this story leaves you with anything, let it be this. Silence is not failure. Patience is not weakness. And the most lasting form of justice is living so fully that those who wrote you off must sit with the weight of every word they chose to believe.